how dare you, how dare you say that the 3D mesh is not a digital twin?
Well, it's a free country here in America, so we're entitled to our opinions. But I think it strikes a nerve, right? Because I think there's so much passion in the industry, and the effort that it takes to learn and to be able to create these amazing deliverables. Whether it is a drone, whether it's your terrestrial capture, whether it's your BIM model, and even and you go back and I have published stating things were a digital twin when they weren't. I completely profess that that has been the case because we didn't really understand the intention of Michael Vicks when he created the term and what it was supposed to mean. So I had to self-correct myself when I truly understood the depth of what it's supposed to mean, and I was trying to communicate that to others too because what I find, and especially in the consulting field I'm in right now, because there's a lot of written works on this topic, you have executives, you have certain individuals that do the research, and there's an expectation that the deliverable is going to meet certain things, right? And then when they come back and there's vendors and manufacturers promising the same term, but a completely different thing, it creates a lot of confusion and a lot of challenges for the industry. So that's one thing. I'd just be a little cautious on terms, and when we use them, understand the implications of those terms.
But still, the term digital twin and all the implications, like it's very broad term, right? So there is like not really a strict definition that everything would fall into. So I'm just questioning this, like why can't we find the way how to include the BIM and 3D mesh model and point cloud into some kind of a version of digital twin?
Well, I think it's a huge part. Like if you look at the Digital Twin Consortium, a core part of the definition is a 3D representation of the physical asset world, whatever. So it's there by default. It is part of that ecosystem, but it isn't a digital twin on its own. In that there is a maturity of levels of information that are brought in for decision process. And at the end of the day, the hope of the digital twin is some sort of decision process, whether it be a predictive outcome, a simulated outcome, or an automated outcome, that the information, once it's unified together, gives you a deeper understanding and it's more actionable. So visualization on its own is really important. To be honest, I had some heartburn with the term reality capture. If you go back to 2014, 15, that term didn't exist. And I was in the LiDAR space. I worked for Faro and for Trimble. And the new term was reality capture, which lumped in photogrammetry and 360 tours with LiDAR. And we were like, well, how dare you? We are terrestrial LiDAR. Like, don't group me with those other people. Like, you're going to dilute the value of the light. So it was a contentious debate at the time. It makes sense now to bring those things in, but there's better definitions of what is a photo or a video or a slam. So but you need to have some common understanding what these things do, and I guess people have to come to terms and agree to use those terms. That's the problem with digital twin is not everyone's on the same page of what it means or what it should mean. And that's why you got a lot of ambiguity of what it's supposed to be.
But you already mentioned that by the definition, the digital twin is a visual representation or a virtual representation of object or space. So I think until we see whether it's connected somewhere, it's still like a Schrodinger's model, right? Or Schrodinger's digital twin. It's at the same time, it is a digital twin and it is not a digital twin.
Well, it's part of it. I think I actually like Barry Bassinet mentioned on your one of your previous podcasts about an atlas. And the map is great, but if you look at the map and there's nothing there to physically delineate what you're trying to communicate, it is just a picture without information. And I think that the reality capture and BIM modeling is great, but without the level of information that helps to represent certain business problems that can be solved, certain use cases, it is just an image on its own, or a 3D image, a 3D point cloud. whatever. So I think the deeper meaning comes from what you connect to it and how you're actionable. And I think what we've done as humans is we bin those computes, right? I can look at it from a subject matter expertise. I can see things, I can make some decisions, but it's a very manual process. And I still need to contextualize it with other data. So I'm open a system, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, I'm looking at this. In the head, I'm the digital twin, right? I'm collecting all this data silos and trying to make a decision from it. So it's the unification of that information into a decision support system. That's really where I think the goal is of what we're trying to achieve with these types of projects. Programs. I'm going to correct that. Programs.
Yeah. Why do you think market still tends to be calling basically anything a digital twin?
Well, I know exactly where it comes from. It comes from the dark side. And that's what the vendors. I mean, to be honest, I mean, your job is to sell a product, right? You get out there, there's a cool term. It's like, well, we need to align with that term. That's what the market wants. So they want to borrow a little bit of that language so they can help position and sell. And a lot of the confusion does usually happen in that sales part of the process. And I hear it like, I hear Matterport commercials. You got all these digital twins. I'm like, that's great. That's a real estate tour. It's fantastic. I can make my decisions. But at the same time, by doing that, you confuse the market a little bit. So that becomes difficult.
Do you? Do you really confuse? Because I think that the idea behind these terms, and it's not only about the digital twins, it's also about the idea of one push of a button scanning with the slime, which we discussed actually with the head of marketing from FG Dynamics like 2 episodes ago. Or it's also with for example, if you speak about I forgot the second point, but my idea is like they are always trying to use broad. I know. I wanted to talk about the iPhone LiDAR, because from the very deep technical point of view, I still think that the TOF falls into a LiDAR definition, but the most of professionals wouldn't call the sensor in iPhone Pro a LiDAR. Right, but since the marketing from the Apple is using the term LiDAR, like who we are to try to like correct it, it wouldn't work. So just please let me finish. I think that the idea behind this is to bring not professionals into the field, but the broader audience with the terms that are easier to touch and understand.
I think. Where the battle happens is on discussions like this, and where people are won over on what they actually what they actually believe, right? But the output of an iPhone is a point cloud, and that's legitimate. A point cloud or a mesh or what you deliver, whether it's a photogrammatic point cloud, a LiDAR-based point cloud. We get into some semantics there, right? But it sits in the reality capture portfolio of products, right? And I think that's fair. You got a home, and these are the products in the home, and there's a spectrum. Am I going to use that for certain use cases? No. I was the first one to buy an iPhone Max and to test it, and I was impressed. I'm still impressed with what you can get with your phone. But if I'm doing object-based modeling or if I'm doing something around the house, okay, great. But am I going to use that for construction? I know people that are using it for wind farms, and they're going up, up in the top of the wind farms. They're using their iPhone to do certain types of baseline documentation. But when does documentation come fabrication? Those are very different things, right?
Absolutely. Just the other day, I was commenting on a post from the COO of Polycam. I think he's a COO. I will put it in the comments. And he was actually trying to make a point with TLS and slams being, how would I say it polite? But he was trying to compare the Polycam scanning with TLS and slams. So it triggered me a bit as I triggered you before with the digital twin, and I just commented that I don't think that this is the right comparison and the right space to be comparing iPhone scanning to TLS. I think the point of iPhone scanning is to democratize the industry, not to replace something that is currently here. Uh, yeah.
I'd say the use case though, like when you get into small spaces, the comparisons get a little bit closer. It's when you walk that thing down the street a mile, you're going to have a stacking error, drift, other types of environmental impacts that happen on those scans, right? So back in my day at Faro, we had a metrology division. So we had trackers, we had arms. We're talking micron level accuracy. So, there's a whole spectrum here from micron based accuracy to millimeter to centimeter to higher. And at the end of the day, what does your use case what does it need to solve the problem, right? The bigger your scene is, the more complicated it gets with that stacking error, right? And with that drift. So I think the devices that are doing very small scan areas, you're in a room, the differences are not going to be as great as when you see on a larger space. Like we had a project done at DFW, and one of the scanning manufacturers, I won't get in the weeds on it, but there were areas of that thing were 14 feet off. And it was TLS, survey control wasn't used effectively. And that's the result of that effort. But if you had a single Faro scan in a room, yeah, it's going to be pretty accurate, right? But it's that compounding accurate. You know this well, Mike. As you start to build more complexity, more scans, more locations, more levels, introduce environmental factors, wind, all these things play a factor into your overall accuracy. And that's where the survey community gets like really kind of, a little nervous on what we're using these devices for.
Mm-hmm. So, for the record, it was Ethan Goldspear, the VP Sales and Business Development of the Polycam. But at the end, we agreed on one thing, that it's really not about replacing these technologies on the big sites. It's really about allowing the scan and reality captures on projects that would be not feasible with traditional methods.
To be honest, I don't care if it replaces it. If it does, it's performing to a certain level, and I'm okay with that because I'm not emotionally attached to an instrument. I'm emotionally attached to solving the business problem first and foremost, right? So
Yeah.
we should think about it from that lens and we have to be really, really careful and test things, right? That's the one thing that there's not a lot of publications. When I was at Faro, I had 3 consultants that worked for us that were engineers. And when we'd have an objective from a competitor, I would say, let's test it. Like go out there, write a white paper. Don't give me a result for a result. Let's go see what it can do and what it can't do. And that's what the community needs more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. I would like to go back for a bit to the definition of the digital twin. Just a few days ago, I was consulting one company about their project, and they insisted on going for a digital twin and for measurements and everything. And I don't know why, because like 2D is against my religion, okay, and I always am pushing 3D everywhere where I can. But somehow I just asked them, like, why do you think you need a digital twin? Like all those like numbers and things you want to measure are static. They are not moving through the place. They are just like, you can express them enough with just like sheet and graphs, and just maybe like a visual representation on a 2D image, for example, thermal image or so, right? So why do you need the digital twin in 3D? That was my question, which I am really sorry for, because it is going against my religion. But that's something that I want to ask you. Like, do you think that every digital twin needs a 3D representation?
I think, it's a tricky one, right? Because you need to have some boundaries with what your definition is. And I do rest on the Digital Twin Consortium's representation of a 3D world versus a 2D world, because there is contextual understanding that you miss in 2D. So I still feel that that is the case. But I still feel there's business problems that don't need 3D. Absolutely. And I think what you're talking about there is a business problem that could be solved with a 2D exhibit or a less complicated deliverable. And what we need to be careful about is, why are we chasing a digital twin? We're chasing a solution to a business problem. So what is the business problem? Who is the stakeholder that is involved with solving that business problem? And can we define that human workflow that is going to change into a digital workflow? And can we quantify ROI? It's a business at the end of the day. If you can't make a business use case, you have no business doing it.
Mm-hmm. Unless it's academic and funded research.
Well, then you have a business.
That's true.
There's always money at the end of the day, right? So I really think that's the best kind of way to approach this. Is that, what I try to do too is I'll sell down the project to solve the problem first, because if you solve the problem, you get trajectory to do a lot more. So on the DFW project, we didn't have BIM models for all the terminals. We didn't have, the information that we needed to be 3D first, right? So, and when we looked at cost, it's like $2 million a terminal, right? To get the scan and BIM done. It's really a big part of the investment. And what we chose to do were other activities that helped to solve the business problem first and to build up those 3D assets later. And at the other end of that was the 80-20 rule, right? So where do I get 80% of my value out of my program with doing 20% of the effort? So looking at the communications infrastructure, HVAC rooms, electrical rooms, scanning all that information, first and foremost, to have it for both the asset inventory and the survey of that physical space to confirm the assets I have in my twin, but also as a visual exhibit. And we used Matterport because that's what the airport had. And we didn't need dimensional accuracy for those rooms. We needed to understand what was physically in them and to have a good visual understanding. And we needed a good resolution on tags and seaports and things like that. So I think it's a good example of the 80-20 rule in terms of gathering the data. These are journeys. So you're never just going to get a project done. I have my digital twin. I go home, I go to bed. I got it. It's never like that. It's a journey, and it's going to be an ongoing investment. It's a program, right? So that's the way you got to look at it.
Would you agree with saying that the digital twin is a process, not a point in a time and space?
I would agree with it. I think there are components that make up a digital twin and how we define it. And yes, you can go and find 1,000 definitions. I do rest on the consortium's definition because I'm comfortable with it. But you need to have a baseline of what it is before you build it, and it can't become that until it has those core ingredients. But I think there's different maturity levels, what we talked about.
Let's solve this once and forever. Imagine you have a point cloud, you have a 3D mesh model, or you have a BIM model. What's the absolute minimum that needs to happen that you would go, I have a digital twin now. I can call it a digital twin.
Those are descriptive exhibits that help us solve problems. I think let's take two examples. Let's take in the design construction world. You're taking that visualization and you start to compare that data. So maybe you have your design model and you have your reality capture, and you're overlaying those for clash detection. Okay, so now and then beyond that, you have the attribution for your BIM, so you know your assets. You're tying that to a project management tool, so you have a business workflow. You may have cost also involved in there. You are really getting very close to digital twin, and you start to align machine learning and other things over top. You're damn close, because you have the ability to do what if scenarios. You may have on the design side, you can run simulations. So those are the types of things. When we get to what if, predictive scenarios, simulation scenarios, that's more mature digital twin. But I think if you're connecting those systems, you have a 3D representation of the physical world. You have various information inputs that allow you to make those decisions. And when I look at it is like, does 1 + 1 = 2, or does it equal something greater? And if it's a digital twin, 1 + 1 can't equal 2. It has to be a higher number. There has to be a higher meaning for putting this data together, that you get some better output, better contextualization, things that you just didn't know. right? Because they're in
Something.
different silos.
Do you
That's what
mean
I look at.
something you wouldn't be able to gather without those two?
Correct. If I looked at them separately, it didn't give me that understanding. Once I start bringing those together, like that point cloud and that BIM model, and you start to see how that interaction between those two different data sources give you a higher understanding. I mean, some of the, and then you start looking at schedule and what's going to happen in the future, and you start seeing the interruptions to your project. So some of this stuff, I think, is where we get dangerously close to digital twin.
Would you
Go ahead.
would you consider the synergy effect if I, for example, had like two free scans of the same site in different times with different stages, and to be able to compare it in a time? Like,
You
do
got
you think
historical
we are
data.
closer?
You're trending at that point. You're trending data. I mean, all of the more data that gets into the twin that actually has a purpose and that is helping you with a decision is going to be maturing your twin project, your twin program. But I hear what you're saying. It's like, when do I officially get to call it a twin and nobody call me a name, right? And there's the real time data, and I have a problem with real time too, because real time could be sub-second, it could be every 15 minutes. So, but it's supposed to be a living thing, the idea of this twin, and that's really elusive, right? It's really elusive because of change, and change happens so frequently. So we have to set the fidelity and what we're going to see is necessary, and it has to be driven around a use case. It has to come back to a business purpose and use case, and how you build that twin to solve that business problem.
You know, if I wanted to be very strict with it needs to have some real time or live data, I could, like, for example, take a Matterport scan of a museum and
Yeah.
attach embedded camera that is live streaming from the museum and embed it into the tour. Would that be a digital twin?
Just like your Google Streets, like if you have you're going online and you see traffic. I mean, in a sense, those are rudimentary digital twins, right? They if you look at the definition, you look at components, right? So I think if you can justify that the components are meeting the problem that you're trying to solve, and they loosely fall within that definition, go for it. But I think if you have a single data source and you're proud of it and it solves one thing but it's not doing others, that's when you get into a little bit of a difficulty. What the thing is, you're redefining reality capture as digital twin. There's already a word for it. It's called reality capture, SLAM. We already have words to define what those are. We're just emotionally attracted to this other word, and we want to recall that what it is.
I totally understand. I get your point, but I still think that the barrier is like getting, like, it's disappearing, like because usually you don't end up with the reality captured something. You always use it for something else. You always can upgrade it with some data and everything else. So I think that I'm not sure whether we are doing good or not good for the future of the digital twins if we try to separate it from the reality capture. What's your idea?
Well, I think reality capture is a fundamental component, right? Whether it is reality capture or a model itself, or using reality capture to create the model, without the 3D space, I think that is the core component of what a digital twin needs to be successful. I really do. I mean, it came from product lifecycle modeling. The whole origin is from the manufacturing process, and how we built models to understand how things perform, so that we could build them more effectively, efficiently, and then we would operate with those models, right? So if you look at the manufacturing process, that's where this kind of came from. It was to design, build, operate, maintain, and decommission a specific asset for a purpose, and to have everything necessary in that product lifecycle model. That's why it's called a product lifecycle model, to be able to most efficiently, effectively, manufacture. So I think where that came into the digital twin, that's really the foundations of where that term came from. And it was used in the NASA trying to look at how do we perform certain activities in outer space, a really complex environment with different things that you can't necessarily replicate in the physical world down on the ground, right? So you had to simulate, you had to give certain attributes that you couldn't. So you could look at different scenarios, right? So I think when you start to think about it from those lenses, there's a lot of parallels that you could do with simulation, and one of them is like even traffic flow and water modeling and weather patterns. A lot of those things are dynamic. They change. They're not as predictable. So when you can start to run scenarios, that's when a really digital twin concept really kind of comes together. But when you look at it from a very simple lens, like if I add 1 + 2, these two data sources, put my camera in my Matterport, I mean, you are giving a live data set to a 3D or a 3D visualization, right? But and does it solve a fundamental problem? It may, but I think there's other ingredients that you're missing there.
There is a reason why I'm grilling you about this term and the definition and what is not, and it's quite simple. I would consider myself the one extreme of this world. Like I have never tried to deliver a digital twin and call it a digital twin.
Yeah.
On the other side, there are original gangsters of digital twins that has been doing digital twins since Jesus walked on the on the water. So they are always claiming that there is no need for a visual representation, like digital twins has been like for 50 years been done with the sheets and graphs and like dashboards and everything else. So this is another extreme, and you are coming somewhere in between because as you mentioned to me before, you are coming actually from the reality capturing world.
Yeah.
And you fell into a digital twin world. So I think you can like understand both sides of this.
I think so. I try to take a pragmatic look at the world. I understand the manufacturing world, and really the digital twin in its composition is a data model. And the data model, what makes it unique is the 3D element, because you can solve information spatially with a digital twin. So do I believe that you can have a 3D model? Or sorry, do I think you have a digital twin without having any type of visual representation? Absolutely not. I mean, you have system performance monitoring. There's other terms in that industry, and I think that industry kind of encroaches on that term, just like the reality capture community encroaches on that term because they like the concept of it, right? But if you look at what John Vickers, what I understand that he was intending to use the word for and define the term, is that the visual space helps. It is a core ingredient to solve the business problem, right? So if you're taking visualization out of this, then it's called something else from my perspective. And I'm not trying to be, the oracle knowledge. It's just, it's my perspective on this. But I see it from both lenses, and I see these communities that are very distinctly different. And you have your reality capture geospatial space that are very much modeling visual world, and then you have your system performance, which we're talking about machine information, sensor telemetry, and building rules and understand how things perform, right? And then you have your data science community that kind of hovers over top of this, and I think they're really the problem is each of these three spaces doesn't know that much about the other space, so they really gravitate to their knowledge and their comfort zone. But if you can kind of bridge those three, you understand that kind of all those things together really are important for building a digital twin. And I would say the AI is really the intelligence layer, could be the controls automation layer, those more mature kind of digital twin outputs. So anyways, I would agree with you. Even your early SCADA systems are real-time information. They give you a visual understanding, but it's not a true depiction of the world. It's a functional diagram. It's a functional model. So you understand how it functions, which is great, and it is a model, but is it a digital twin? I think that's where you get into this debate.
We have a question from Rami, and he wants to put us on a very difficult spot. He's
Uh-oh.
asking whether we can agree that the end result of an area captured scanned with the Matterport free device is not a digital twin. You go first.
Well, I'll agree to that. But I'll use them in my twin program. I had like 1,400 Matterport files, projects that were tied to GIS and brought into the DFW project. So I think they're a component, but I don't think they're a twin on their own.
I would call it the digital twin, and there is one reason, one and only reason for that. I mentioned this during the episode with Barry Bestnet. You can go rewatch it, guys. And we discussed this also with Kelly before. I still think that any 3D representation is like the basic, like level 0 or level 1 or LOD 0 or whatever. We can call it whatever. I still think like it's a vital part of the digital twin. It's very stupid. It's very simple, but it is still a part of it. Okay.
So I'm going to just push back there. So let's say you go into your kitchen and you're going to cook some muffins, right? Do you call your bag of flour a digital twin?
You mean a cookie?
Muffins, cookies, whatever. So
Yeah.
so whatever you're cooking, right? So you're going to bake something, and there's different ingredients for what you need to bake, right? So if I have a box of flour, right? So I'm going to put flour. It's one of the ingredients I'm going to make my cookies with. Do I call the bag of flour do I call it a cookie, or do I call it a bag of flour?
I get your point. I have another question for you. When
Sure.
you see a car and you haven't opened the hood, you don't know whether there is an engine or not. Would you call it a car?
I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't call it a Ferrari if it was a Suzuki.
No. I'm not asking
Yeah.
about the brand. Is it a car or is it not?
It's a classified as a car, yes. So I mean, I think we can agree to disagree on how we look at this world, and I don't think we're going to finish it on this podcast.
Of course,
that's okay.
And since I'm not professional on digital twins, I totally like admire your point and respect it. So, guys, if you want to take a device on this from somebody, take it from Kelly. Okay, it's my only opinion that I consider it a basic level of the digital twin, but Kelly is the professional one here. But I wanted to get to your background, Kelly. That's why I mentioned that you're coming from reality capturing world. Could you like tell me what was, if you can remember, please? I'm not saying you're old, but I'm saying you have a lot of experience. If you can remember your first touch with the 3D world, what was your feeling like? What was the first touch of 3D?
Well, I don't know my first touch with 3D, but with a terrestrial laser scan, it was when I was with Trimble. And I was in the public safety space. It's the first space I started to touch 3D visualization, and it was pretty fascinating. But even trying to understand a point cloud, like the newer community, trying to understand what it is, put my hand through it. It's not a surface, but it was so slow, right? And I think in that world too, everything had to be dumbed down to 2D. You're using the 3D scanner to create a 2D exhibit. And it really felt like such a waste when there's this rich data that could be used. And I think the same as today. You have hard drives with data that go to the graveyard. And it really, to me, I'm a huge champion of making that data operational and to see what we can do with it. But yeah, that's back 2000, early to 2010, 12, somewhere around there, where I started to get involved with that kind of data. I think I was at Trimble at 2014. So not that long ago, if you look at it, right? It's not that long ago,
What kind of education do you have? Like, because you mentioned you're not a surveyor, right? So you are self-made reality capturing professional at the beginning, or?
I think most of us, I don't remember there being a college other than survey school of reality capture, or even digital twins. So I think it is an experience that you learn over time. There are those courses today that are starting to come out, but no, it's a trial and error and get out there and coming in probably from the manufacturing end is where I came in, where I was working for Trimble and Faro. And Faro, when they put out their the Faro 120 was pretty revolutionary at the time because it was a very small portable scanner that was cost effective and it really started to proliferate at the time. So I think, there's a lot of excitement, still a lot of misunderstanding, brutal data processing, manual objects, just computers crashing, no cloud software, all of that pain that we saw in the early years, right? But where my experience really came is I am not afraid to challenge and to learn and to dig in and to surround myself with other very smart people. So the things that I'm saying are usually ideas that flew from other people. They're not my necessarily original opinions, but they help to shape what my thoughts are on the world. So, that's where I kind of came from.
What happened? When did it happen that you moved from reality capturing to digital twin? And I think that the feeling must have been like it's just not enough.
Well, so I left Faro and I had my own reality capture company, Visual Plan, and I was doing a lot of work. And what kind of was a litmus of me creating the company is my friend Matt Daly had sent me a 360 camera at the time. And it was, Ricoh camera, just did the house quickly. I knew what Matterport was, but I just didn't understand that the amount of data that how quickly you could capture with 360 camera. And that really kind of got me excited. He had a company called Struction Site, was sold to Drone Deploy. Still good friends with Matt. And I got a 5-article series going out with him on this whole topic of reality capture. But, that what I found is that there was so much discussion. If I'm not just building a design exhibit, which is your traditional, output, I laser scan something, I hand that over, or I create a design for a business purpose, right? If I wasn't in that world, I didn't want to be in that world. I want to be in the operational world. I wanted to see how we can take this data and use it for operations. It was a lot of discussions, a ton of discussions. So whether it be in the security, oil and gas, energy industry, we capture the data, but it would whet the appetite, but it wasn't enough. It's like, yes, I can solve problems, but can I do this? Can I connect it to this? And so what I end up doing is a lot more discussions on really IT projects and how do I bring the asset management system into here and how do I, and my brain's quite critical thinking and creative. So I like to say, well, if I could have this and I could have that, and you start to think of what you can construct and what problems you can solve. But it really comes down to, who are you solving the business problem for? And what do they need out of this thing that you're creating? And really not everything. It's really what is the right amount of information to solve that business problem. And sometimes like a huge, ginormous point cloud is way too much information. And a field worker can't use that on their mobile device. So like that's the wrong solution for that. And it may be in the background, it may be feeding it. But you really got to look at the person behind the business problem and what they need to solve. So a lot of those conversations led into what I thought were very innovative use of the technology at the time. But what really hit me is I had a reseller agreement selling a software application as part of what I was doing, and that was cut while I was on the trade floor of a triple IE conference and a $10,000 booth and 3 people at the booth and had to switch at that time. So, it's a bit crumbling losing that software revenue you build up over time. And I had people looking at me for role and someone was looking at this DFW role. And I said, well, that's pretty interesting. I could learn an awful lot being on the owner side, really trying to dig into some really complicated problems. So that turned into a 4-year program that we built, and I learned a lot. But it's nice when you have money to put on a problem and you have a willingness and an army of people to solve it, right? So and that's not something I had in the past. So that was really, I think once you get onto that side, you can see what the opportunities really look like.
You are referring to DFW project?
Yeah, the airport project. Yes.
So it's in Detroit or?
Dallas, Fort Worth.
Dallas. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No worries. Sorry about the acronyms. Yeah.
No problem. So was this your first project that you would call like very confidently a digital twin, or did you have like before smaller projects?
So we had done a number of projects in the past connecting fault detection and asset management systems. So I think we had the ingredients of digital twin on some of the projects I was doing under Visual Plan. But no, this is the first big one, the very big project that I was confident that yes, we've accomplished the core components of a twin.
I want to go back to that project later, but before that, I would like to establish also like your reality capturing business and proficiency and expertise. I have seen you testing some SLAM solutions. You have mentioned several times Matterport and in general, I very much agree with your opinion. If I can concise it, I would just say like the right tool for the right job, right?
Yeah,
It's not about that I'm owning TLS, so I will use TLS on everything. It's about using the tool that is built and meant for the job or the end game that I want to deliver, right? For like the main goal or solving the main problem. So
yeah. So I mean, this is a big one because it can be a Pandora's box, just like a BIM. And what is the level of attribution that's necessary for that BIM? There's different use cases, different people that may need other levels of attribution. But what is the scope? What is the scope of the project? So, that's why I've been talking a lot about programs versus projects and what is the intent and future use of this, what I'm calling reality capture data fabric. I'm more comfortable with that term than digital twin. I think it's an important data fabric that goes into a twin project. But what I mean by that is, if you're in oil and gas and you're doing a terrestrial laser scan, who gets to use it downstream? How do you repurpose it, right? So I think, we understand and design out these projects earlier, and this is what my blog posts are going to start to really dig into deeply, is start to think about, okay, as an organization, we're going to buy off on the fact that we've decided reality capture is that important, right? We've decided Esri as a mapping tool is very important for organizations. They built complete workflows and teams to manage Esri. Well, why not reality capture, right? Someone's managing your asset management platform. Someone's managing other information. These are information data sets. It's just a unique data set. And it's often discarded. But imagine if you have a program where it is a manageable asset that you're building for various stakeholders for daily use. Well, if you think about it from that lens, you need to understand who uses it and how, or what platforms it feeds into.
So
and that's
sorry,
when you
sorry.
really
When
need to understand that fidelity, right? Go
sorry,
ahead.
when you say the term program, you don't mean a software. You actually mean like a
No, no,
platform or like a
no. A
part of a
program is
company.
something you fund over time, as
Mhm.
opposed to a project has a beginning and an end. So what happens with projects is data goes to the graveyard after the project, and that's what happens with a lot of our terrestrial data because it's a single purpose use. You use it to build a design, and oftentimes the owner never even sees a point cloud. Right, the point cloud is on a hard drive. It sits in a basket. That kills me because I know the amount of effort it takes to create it, and I know like structural parts of your building are not going to change much. The interior does. So your staircases, your walls, your slabs, like that's still very valuable data that could be repurposed, but it doesn't. For the most part, in the past, it hasn't. So you look at a program is something budgeted. This is a head count. This is something that's going to go on because we've invested, we understand it's important. So at an airport, like geospatial is a critically important part of the airport ecosystem. I think there's like 400 layers or even more at DFW. Well, there's a GIS manager, there's a GIS supervisor, there's GIS technicians, and their whole job is to manage that data source over time and the change over time
So
based on the requirements.
this could
Yeah.
be like a department in a company,
Yes, I
right? So
100%. You're certain like
alongside the accounting, alongside the marketing, you will have like a reality capturing factory department or whatever you
yeah.
want to call it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I absolutely believe that. And you're seeing it happen. Actually, I can tell you the biggest testament of this is Exxon. So ExxonMobil has made a very ambitious investment, and they really talk about reality first, and they're seeing the world through reality, and they're building the world around that. And they have talked to Kyle Doherty over at Exxon just at the last couple of conferences. And he said that every single asset in the world will be scanned by the end of this year. But it's not a project that ends there. If you imagine, it's like, okay, we did it. Okay, we'd all go home. No, that's the beginning. That is your baseline of reality capture. Now you got to manage it. Now you got to make sure that. So how are you managing it, and what tools? Right? If I had to go out there with the same tool for design every time, would I be able to accomplish it, or can I use other tools to serve the business problems of the stakeholders that need it on the ground? So those are critical decisions that the business owners need to make, and to think through how they're going to make this a usable data fabric, and how it's going to feed into their other platforms, and how they're going to solve business problems and get value from it every day.
I love the idea that that it's not a stage; it's a process, and it's never-ending process. And I have an example from one of my consultations. Again, it's a multinational company. They have like hundreds of factories all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot disclose it, but I'm sure they will find themselves here in what I'm going to say, because they have a dedicated reality capturing department.
Yeah.
So they have like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 people just doing scanning all around the world of their facilities. And when I was consulting them and discussing with them, I asked, like, is there a project that you have already scanned twice? And they were quite surprised, because they said, oh, some of them we are doing every year.
Yeah.
So just imagine having hundreds of thousands of square meters, one site, and you are scanning it every year.
Yeah.
And I honestly think this is the future for big companies, for big plants. And with the digital twin, I really think that this is the future. It will be like almost continuously scanned.
Yeah, that's where you need to look at efficiencies, right? So,
Sure.
one of the OGs of the digital twin world, I like to say, his name is Amadeus Berger. I'll give him just a chime there. Really brilliant guy, and he's been in the nuclear industry, and pretty much was the guy going out there building digital twins for nuclear before the term was even created on the product lifecycle stage. And they would go and rescan all the change within those plants, right? So where I want to get to efficiencies is, do we need to rescan the entire plant every year, or do we need to look at the areas of change, right? And how do we do that most efficiently and effectively to solve the business problem, but not to cost too much? Because you don't want to create that waste.
Who in the company is going to remember every change, so that the guys with the scanning department will came and you will tell them, okay, this was changed, this was not changed on a 100.
Yeah, but there's a change management process in these big organizations. So you need to be, so just like a design process, there's a process there, and people are involved with that process. There's a checklist, there's a commissioning, there's different ways that we can approach this, right? So if you're embedded in the organization, if you're part of that change process, and if you limit the investment to something that's reasonable and quick, then it can be really something that actually happens. And that's going to affect the trust factor, right? Because if I'm an operator, and I know this was scanned 2 years ago, I'm like, well, I still got to go out to site to see it. And that's the key. Like, if you think about building an asset and think about, 50 years, how many people over that time from different disciplines, managers, field technicians, go and do that site visit back and forth to retrieve some information visually, measurement data, whatever it may be. You try to add that up over 50 years. What does that mean? It's an amazing amount of waste, right? Amazing amount. So if you think about a program in which we have a timestamp of when it was done, we have a credible team that is involved in change management and is on top of it, and we know when things have been documented, and maybe we even have that tied to our asset management system, say, listen, you know what, nothing was changed in that space. And that's an ideal world. We all know that the business is messy, but we can incrementally get better, right? So, but I do believe that this is possible, and that's why DFW, like, we hired our own survey team instead of an engineering company to come in to handle all the Matterport stuff. But it's now, it was a 15-minute scan in those rooms to recapture the change, even if it was just a visual photocopy in time. And the nice thing about reality capture, it's a forensic capture in time. It's not interpreted. A BIM model has got a human deciding what to model, what not to model, what to attribute, what not to attribute. The photographs and imagery and LiDAR is a forensic copy in time of what that physical environment looked like.
I think it's also good to mention that if we are speaking, for example, about the scanning every year, it does not necessarily mean that every time it's done with TLS, right?
Right. Yep.
Because, for example, in terms of like keeping control of potential structural changes, okay, like the earth is working, like the everything is working, the construction side is always working in time. So for example, for any potential damages on a beams or structural components of the plant, you can do, for example, like every 3 or 4 years, a very detailed TLS scan of structures, right? For the change of the layouts of the plant, for the disposition of different like machines and conveyors and everything else, you don't need millimeter accuracy. You're perfectly fine with, for example, Navis scan or
Well,
the
it depends on the
or any
person.
SLAM,
Are you
right?
using it for training? If you're using it for training, I don't need any accuracy
Yeah.
other than it be
Yeah.
visually accurate, right?
No, I want
So
to go. I want to go
wayfinding.
down
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole. So for
Yeah.
example, for just the smaller sites, it's perfectly fine to use Matterport at the end, which you can use several times during the year. And like the real bottom could be like, why not to wear a 360 camera on your helmet every day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are different levels of what we're talking about is frequency and fidelity. How frequent do I need the information, and to what resolution or quality? So
Yep.
those decisions need to be made around a use case, and usually it's a stakeholder that has a business problem, whether it be a training department or whether it be the mechanical technicians or whether it be a manager, whomever. Once you've defined the people that are involved, and structural is another one, right? So if I have a bridge or I have a dam, like there is a use case for structural monitoring for sure, right? If that is a use case that is a business problem that warrants the justification and cost to create the deliverable, right? So I just think we need to start to think about, okay, we have another problem solving tool. It's reality capture. It is in all these types and flavors of resolution, quality, and there are different costs and efforts to get them. So let's apply reality capture to our business world and say, well, what problems can we solve with it as an organization, as an enterprise, right? And what is the value if we can gather that data over time? And we've already made those bets on mapping. We made those bets on other types of databases that we build. We know information drives better decisions. Why not reality capture? Why is it stuck in design or in certain spaces? Shouldn't be.
That's why I love the idea of dedicated department, and we should come up with the abbreviation for the C-level manager for it, like something like CDT or something like.
Oh, we're going to create another word, are we? Oh boy.
Let's go.
There we go. There we go. No, I think it's becoming a really important thing. And I think there's other technologies that are going to grow too, like you've just with machine vision and with physical LiDAR, we're installing for movement. You get to a place where a static sensor is continuously measuring the change in a space. And whether that be traffic movement or whether it be people movement, it's a whole different dynamic than what we've been talking about so far. But principally, what we're talking about is a sensor device, whether it be a LiDAR, photogrammetry, stereographic, that is measuring something over time to give us better decisions on how we work.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment here from Imam that the operation maintenance having its own reality capture team is not good for us, 3D laser scan service companies. What do you think about it?
I think it depends on the business, right? So again, it comes down to frequency and fidelity. If you don't have a team that is going to be busy enough to scan at the rate that you can employ someone, that might be a problem. So, but then you get back to project-based scanning. And I would just challenge you to think a little deeper about how else you could be using the data. So if it's just for operations and maintenance, and you're not thinking about other business purposes for using it, you might be thinking one-dimensionally. So the organization could be using it for other purposes. And that's why going through that process of who are the stakeholders in the business that could use visualization, who walks out to the shop floor, who walks out to see things, and who needs to understand, whether it be wayfinding, security. There's a load of use cases that people don't really think about because they get really into that kind of, I need it for this one purpose. But whether that department is under IT, whether it's under construction, whether it's under the maintenance team, you still need to have someone that's adequate, that's comfortable with that data source. So would I put Joe Splo with a laser scanner when he doesn't have that comfort level with it? Maybe not. Maybe it's another department within the organization. But I think the enterprise needs to look at it. It depends on the size and the value of that data set to the organization.
Mm. My point of view would be that we are still in a quite early stage of reality capturing and digital twins. So my goal is to never trying to find barriers for any company or people going into the business. Okay, so with that being said, if there is a company that has tens or hundreds of different sites over the country or over the continent, you're not trying to convince them that you are going to scan for them everything. That's really stupid, and it makes total sense for them to build their own department for such a scale.
It's a maturity. It's got to be a maturity level, and you can't just start gunslinging, right?
And at the same time, if you help them develop their own team and help them going through this process, like just imagine how many different companies, different maintenance managers and facility managers they are meeting and they're discussing this with. And most of them are not the same level. Like most of them have like 1 or 2 or 3 sites in the country, where for them, it actually makes sense to hire somebody to do this. And if you are supportive with that bigger company, you might be the one ending up scanning those sites. So
I agree, and I think there's a really good role for service providers to play. Like my goal of this discussion is not to say, no, the service world's gone, all owners are going to take over. That's clearly not the case, because there is an expertise in this industry, right? And it's really for the service companies to help build the programs so that you're attached to those organizations. And it's a long-term play. You're part of the program, maybe from a mentorship, leadership, standards, or maybe from the TLS position, and they're doing SLAM or imagery. So it's going to be a hybrid of efforts, right? Even DFW they have Navis, they have Leica, they're not doing the terminals. No way. Their survey department serves a purpose, and they do certain size and scope, but they know when they need a service provider to come in and do those big lists. So I think it's kind of finding your place and redefining the ecosystem, but the goal is more, and it is capture more, solve more problems, and build the data fabric. And to think of this as an ongoing investment, like I said at the previous conference I was at, we dispose of the data today, and it goes to the data graveyard. And what we need to think about is, if we capture the data in a certain way, we're investing for the future. And in a lot of use cases, they even need to have historical documentation. If you're looking at things like corrosion and derogation on your assets, a single capture is not enough. You need to have different points in time capture done. So thinking about it from different lenses and really mapping out a strategy on how this is a data fabric that can be fed into different operational tools for different stakeholders for different reasons, but it needs to be maintained. It's not a one and done.
And I think it's also the similar discussion to when you are on a construction site, and like typical way of doing things is to call surveying company and do all the measurements and every stakeout and everything else on the site for them. But in reality, not every job is a job for a certified surveyor. That's why there are so many reality capturing companies that are not like educated surveyors, because you don't need it for every job. And it's very similar. It's like trying to put a barrier on companies doing their own scanning. It's very similar to if you are a surveyor and you are trying to convince everybody that only you can do the scanning. Right.
Well, you lay out your survey monuments, right? Perfect. Once they're there, make those permanent monuments, and you repurpose them over time. So again, I think there's a role for everyone to play there. But I think one of the biggest things for me just kills me is in construction. There's such a huge lost opportunity for the data capture during construction. Like the walls are open, you have utilities and pipes in the concrete floor. You're gonna pour concrete. Like, give me that data. Like that data, and that's one of my big burns is that, maybe there's a 7 to 9 capture milestones that you'll
I
want a complete understanding of all assets in place. The value of that over time is just absolutely huge. And I don't
I
know
ha-
why we're not doing it yet.
I have called it several times, like the construction industry is dinosaur of all industries. Like every other industry is much more digitized than the construction side. And I think the reason might be about the people working in a construction on a construction site. I'm not speaking about managers and about higher levels of the management. I'm speaking about the last person that is like pouring the concrete, that is manipulating the materials and everything else. They are not ready to be digitized at
That
all.
might be true, but it's the owners that make these decisions, not the
That's true.
construction GCs. The GCs just show up, do what they absolutely need to do, and nothing more. So it is really the owners that need to make the decision that this is important for them, and they are. I mean, if you look in the U.S. market, I would say a very large number of the construction projects, the large critical infrastructure projects, have 360 imagery and some type of LiDAR used on them and drone imagery. It's becoming commonplace. The problem is that data dies with the project. Instead of having a owner say, no, okay, we are going to preserve data at these points in time through the project, because that data is going to be handed over to operations and is going to be used for the life cycle of that building, right? So when you think about it from that lens, and it's like that's a milestone, it's a goal, there's a task, there's a project manager, there's a checklist. It has to be done, handed over to this person. The owner can make these decisions, but it has to
Do,
feed into the project
do you
at the
think
owner's level.
do you think that the managers are not educated enough, or they don't see the value enough, or do you think that it really is a case of cost for them?
It's both, but if I was looking at costs from a project perspective, I don't want to have anything in my project. But if I look at it a program perspective or an enterprise perspective, I know ripping apart those walls is very expensive. It is the absolute cheapest time I could ever do this work is during construction. It's just like other things, like laying cable and conduits, because you're going to do a future project for some sensoring. If you do it later, it costs you like 3, 5, 10 times the amount. So that's why you have to be doing this from a strategic perspective. Like if we do feel that understanding what's behind my walls, above my ceiling, and below my concrete, and especially subsurface. Like think of all this one kills me. Like all of the strikes that happen with excavators on a construction site. You're hitting power, water, gas lines. It is insane today that information is not all documented and part of the punch list. When you have trenches open, like how much energy does it take to run a drone down a trench and capture that data, or whatever method that you're using? It's ludicrous today that we're not doing. Absolutely ludicrous. And a lot of these are low hanging fruit that are low cost, but we think tactically and we have speed of project, and it's not in budget, not in scope. Got to get the project done, because the project manager's only goal, get that project done on time, on scope, on budget. That's all they drive. But if this is not a task that is a requirement for handover, if it is, it has to be done. So that's where the owner drives the deliverables and the outcomes. But that education has to happen at the owner's level, so they understand and they buy in to those investments. And again, it's building that data fabric, investing in that data so it's valuable later.
Do you think it might be something with the like construction managers? If they have some bonuses, they usually have some bonuses when they save money, right, from the
Yeah.
budget, and for their brain, doing some work to avoid mistakes and reworks, this is definitely money lost. But if they just bet on that everything is going to be fine, it's easier money for them, money, like in quotes. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that this is the problem of their thinking? Like they don't
Yeah.
consider
It's
saves
self-interest. I
money?
mean, and you can't blame them. They're trying to run a business, and it's a risky business. Construction is a very risky business, and there's all sorts of challenges through construction. So they're not going to make that. They'll make the decision for themselves, and they already have. Like a lot of GCs use 360 imagery for construction photography, and they've already seen the value. Like on their own, they understand that if they invest in this, the project coordination, the project scheduling, the catching defects early in the stage, all these things are adding up to bottom line costs for them that they bought in, but they don't have this thought of handover of this data set. It is for their purpose to run their projects effectively and efficiently as a project. But do they think about, kind of 10 years from now on how this data is going to be used to help the business? No. I mean, they're not incentivized by that. And I'm not trying to be negative about the industry. I'm just, they're definitely people that care about this. They probably are talking to owners a little bit, and maybe not just getting through to why that might be important. But the industry needs to come down and really help to give owners that insight to drive that behavior and that investment.
What do you think where reality capturing world is heading? What do you think about slams? What do you think about autonomous scanning?
I love it. Like, I mean, so I was trained on mobile mapping with Sateco in Italy like 9 years ago, setting up base stations and the ladybug cameras and the complexity of your computer. It was a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work. A lot of data processing. It was massive, right? And you think about some of the things that we did in the past and what we can do today. Like I had a manufacturer gave me a Manifold. That's a new LiDAR handheld device. And I took it up, and it was, the promise, the one button click. It was that easy to get started and go. And I scanned my block, and there was a bit of breeze going. The trees were going up, and I'm cognizant. I know where things fail, and if I really wanted to push it, I would give it a way harder test to begin. But I was significantly impressed. I've used other SLAM units, and it came together really nicely. So I see the cost of hardware going down. I see the ease of use becoming easier to use, but I also feel it creates confusion in the market for owners, and owners feel like they want the cheapest cost, they want the lowest cost, but they get confused on what is this accuracy versus that accuracy. So, and we've seen it where projects, you're going into a project and it has to be terrestrial, like it does, and someone subs it out as something else. You're like, that's going to fail, and it ends up costing more because they fail, and they come back and they still have to do the original. Now your budget is blown, and all these things happen, right? But that's where clarity in the market's important. That's why product testing and validation and understanding, as we were talking about, right tool for the right job. But I do think there's going to be a lot more SLAM. I think there's going to be a lot less cost on the products that we're purchasing. And you're going to see a whole growth of user base based on it becoming easier to do. And just look at the software processing, right? It's never been hard to turn a scanner. Like, give me a break. You sit there and it's still, you set up your settings. You need to know the positioning. You need to know the overlap. Like there's some of that on running a terrestrial laser scanning, but the pain was always in the software before. And it used to be really painful to put it together and to be able to test and validate that your data was accurate. The software is really getting better, but it's getting better to a certain point that they're no longer critically thinking. They're just trusting. And you can't do that. You still got to make sure your instrument is calibrated. You need to do some reference measurements. You got to look at the data, interrogate the data, and you need to understand the limits of certain technology. So I think as long as you're in that wavelength, and that's why there's still going to be a role for the professional in this. It's just like anything. Like, I mean, I can run a thermal imaging device over a piece of equipment. I'm a thermal qualified person, so I'm a level 2, so I can interrogate the data. But if I don't know, it's just a picture. You need to be able to interrogate the data to understand and validate it.
You are saying about the TLS that you need to know how to verify data and how to put it together. But I still think that for somebody that is new to reality capturing world, the TLS is way to go, not the SLAM. Because with TLS, it's always fixable. Like you can always ask somebody; they can dial into your computer and just help you with the data, with the registration, and with fixing things.
You
Or
can't.
if
Yeah,
data, if sorry, or if data is missing, you can always send them to recapture some portion. With
yeah.
SLAM, it's quite difficult to fix something remotely.
So I think I agree with you some part to that, because it's not like you can do RTK on your SLAM, you can do survey control, rebat.
Outside, but what
Yeah.
about
You
inside
can
of the
use
buildings?
monuments inside, same thing. You can use control points inside, absolutely. Like we use an Avis to scan a large part of Terminal D in the airport. All of it
Perfect,
was
Kelly.
control.
But
But if
you
you don't
know
have
that
control, if you don't lay it down, you can't fix that.
Kelly, you
Yeah,
know that the newcomer is never going to use the control. They are never
yeah,
going to use targets. Okay,
yep. You're
and
true.
most of reality capturing companies, maybe I'm wrong. Most of them are not using targets with and control, especially with TLS. With slams, you sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to use it because otherwise you are risking like a huge mistake and a huge fail.
Mhm.
So, but once again, if I come back to newcomers into industry, they are sold the idea of one push of a button solution. Oh, you just press here
Yeah.
and you hold your phone and you can walk your entire site and it will register for you perfectly accurate to 2 centimeters of absolute accuracy.
Oh yeah, those types of long claims.
Nice.
They always you tell a land surveyor that they laugh at you.
I
But
would love to
yeah,
meet that person that will achieve this in a project of 10,000 square meters. Like
but
just
if the
walk
accuracy
one.
doesn't matter, like that's where it comes back to. I agree with you that you can fix terrestrial often, if as long as you've taken enough scans, or you can go out and grab some more scans, right? But I can't. If there's a door and you scan on both sides of it, like it's going to be hard to put that data together. You can, but you're still eyeballing. I guess you can with walls and stuff. You can do a lot more of that. At least you have individual scans that you can manipulate each one. You can move it around. You can re-register. You can pick common points in rooms. There's a lot of different methods to do that. So I think for newcomers, I think your recommendation to understand the principle of laser scanning first with terrestrial is not a bad
and
idea. I
and
think I think it is.
I'm not saying they should purchase 60-70,000 word scanner. I'm
Yeah,
just saying go for some training into other company or just rent a scanner for a few days and get in touch with that. And
learn it first. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I, I
Because
I'll actually totally agree with
you
you on that. If you're going
because
to
you
be in the
will
scanning business, you should know terrestrial before you go into other things.
exactly because you know what to expect, what's overlap, what's moving objects, what's drifting data. Like there's multiple situations when you are not even able to register cloud to cloud terrestrial scanning data.
Sure, sure.
And in this situation, SLAM is going to fail heavily, I think. So, and you need to be aware of those.
Yeah, you need to be able to validate when your data is not looking good, and it's not performing well. You have to be able to do some tests on your data to be able to determine that. And I think that's the biggest thing is the industry is not knowledgeable, and they buy the tools and they rent the tools, they go out, do the job, and they feel they've done a good job, but they just don't know what they don't know. So that's part of the problem.
And one thing I would suggest to guys in terrestrial laser scanning, never trust the green light. When your
On the
registration says,
registration, yeah, I
yeah,
know.
when your
Every time
registration
you look
says
at it, it's all like this. I'm
green,
like, it ain't green.
never trust the green light. Always go to section view
Yeah,
and just validate and check this manually and visually. Never trust the green light. But still, I'm interested in what you think about the autonomous scanning. Like, do you think that robots are going to replace all the operators on sites?
Well, replace everyone, no, but I think a lot of this is going to become a lot more autonomous. We're already seeing it happen for sure. But you got to understand too, like physical environments, especially in construction, are really tricky. You don't have nice polished concrete everywhere, like a Home Depot floor. Construction sites difficult. So putting robotics into construction is difficult, but they're absolutely doing it. Like drones, you can do autonomous drones. Drone in the box was the highlight of the industrial conference I was just at in Houston, and it's happened rapidly. So yes, it's happening, but you still produce data, and someone's got to deal with the data. And as you know, data doesn't come out perfectly, so someone is going to have to be able to do some analysis. Now, I think the analysis is also going to start to become more and more automated, but you still need to have some governance, and governance is the term, right? It's like who's going to govern this data to ensure it is fit for use, and the risk is if you don't do it and you trust that data, imagine what can happen as a consequence, especially in something like design and construction, right? If it's just
Mhm.
visualization, the severity is far less, right?
This is just a little shout out and a teaser for, because in 10 days I will be having a live episode with the representative from Exin Technologies, and they are specialized in autonomous scanning of different kind of sites. So I'm
Yeah.
very excited about that one. So if you guys are interested in where the future of scanning, autonomous scanning is going, then I definitely recommend this episode. It's going to be on 16th of July. And do you think, Kelly, that if this will be the case, that, like, I don't know, 40%, 50, 60% of scan operators will be replaced because they will be able to be replaced because it's going to be very feasible. It's going to be on sites that are not too complicated. For example, industrial plants, like we already have for these robots, like moving materials and everything else.
Yeah.
So I think this is the ideal situation where there is no need for a human to be doing scanning, right?
So I look at this even just like conversation of AI in general, right? So those that embrace the technology, learn the technology, and can harness the technology will be huge winners. Imagine if I had a survey crew of robots and I own the company and I can send my robots and they can go and do their job and gather their data, how more profitable you'd be. So I think that, but there's still someone that's got to maintain it, set it up. Like there's a lot more resources than people think that it takes to execute on these programs. I know I actually set up a robot in a central utility plant for doing inspections. There's a lot of work setting that up, getting it right, and there's still someone that needs to manage it. So you might offset, and this is what I actually see happening. I see a lot more data being captured. I see no fewer people in the industry. I actually feel that your data increases exponentially, but the actual workforce, they transitioned into slightly different roles, but they're still in the industry doing in the same space, but just doing different activities. And usually robots take over the boring numbness that you do from the job, the repetitive tasks that humans are not really great at. We're not really good at repetitive, boring things. We're creative creatures, right? So you take that part out of the job and you give the human what we're the most capable robots on the planet are humans. The dexterity, what we can do, or human judgment, that is the you have to put the human in that position to make those decisions. That's my thought on it. But I'm excited about it. I hear these optimists are going to come off the manufacturing line at like 23 grand a pop. I'm like, that's insane. What can you do with it? But it's going to be a lot of work getting it to perform the task that you want it to do. So your cost of the robot is not your final cost of the robotic workflow.
Definitely, definitely. Tell me more about your airport project, because of first time I learned about yourself and your projects, I was like, oh man, like this is the probably biggest case of a digital twin there possibly is. Like, what a project to be scanning and dealing with an airport.
Yeah, it was a pretty exciting one. I mean, there's plus and minus. You got budgets, which are great. You got ambitious programs. You have people and staff, but you get a lot of process too because it's government. So those are the challenges, right? But we were able to tackle a lot of different use cases, and that was exciting. And to be able to quantify things with a financial controller at the airport too, and go through and forecast the savings, another big thing. So we handled. Well, Robert Brown on the control analytics side, he's handled all the construction related activities. He was over pretty much the whole program. I worked with him, but so all your digital power for construction, your connection to project management was a different division. I handled the operational digital twin for the service, basically the system performance of equipment, fault detection, things of that nature, and then we started rolling out LiDAR movement. So there was a real big need at the airport to understand congestion. And that's everything from vehicle congestion to passenger movement, touch points. And there's a big loss of revenue factor there too. So for airports, your number one revenue is landing fees. The airport has to touch the ground, get to the gate, and the next one has to get out, or you don't make money. That is your number one revenue maker. So when you have disruptions, when you have things fail and you have to change gates, we've all been in a plane and you have to move the plane or get off the plane. It's not a very fun situation, but it causes disruptions. The same with traffic coming into the airport. If the vehicles don't get into the airport and can't catch their flight, what happens is people don't spend as much money in the airport. That's your number two. Your non-aeronautical revenues come from, sitting in and having a beer or going to buy something. So you need to reduce the friction of people getting through to basically a shopping mall. Airports are a shopping mall once you get past security. So you want them to be relaxed and feel like they have time and that they'll sit and spend. So there's a lot of measuring, right? You have all these different touch points to measure.
You mentioned how much does it cost when the airport is not in operation and is basically it's stopped. We know what happened in Iran and all the situation in the Middle East, and when the airport of Dubai stopped the operation. This is a fun fact, but it's a question for you. Like, do you know what was the costs of not operating?
I think I've seen some numbers in news articles, but it was absolutely just staggering. Millions and millions up to even, I don't know if I'd say the word
horrible,
billion, but it's high.
It's horrible. It was $1 million a minute.
Yep. Yeah.
There were calculations that altogether it's around $1 billion a day, I think.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, it's well, and if you look at a manufacturing plant, oil and gas, these are operational disruptions, right? So, what the promised reality capture is kind of back to the discussion of, well, why do we capture data, right? On the construction, it is tool time. It is to effectively make sure that there is frictionless construction throughout that project till completion. So schedule interruptions are very difficult. If the site's not ready, that team has to go away. That's very disruptive. The planning aspect of the construction site, same thing as on the facility side. We need to diagnose and find a problem before it becomes a disruption, right? So you need to be monitoring things, be able to have visibility, and to be able to then move to a planning phase and effectively plan the response. So planning takes a whole sorts of things. I might need a scissor lift to get up to my asset, right? I need escort to get into a physical area. Who has access to that space? Is there environmental risks? So there's asbestos in this. All these different things add up to waste, right? And schedule interruptions. So the same with flights. What flight gate do we need to get this to? When I come in my vehicle, where is the parking spot? Where can I get to that perfect spot? What level? Where do I go? That's all information, right? And the information that's fed to us as creatures, we make decisions, right? So humans make decisions really quickly based on information sent to us, but we don't have information, so we make poor decisions, right?
Oh, when you were creating the digital twin of the airport, were you using only like existing information and sensors, or were you also like developing the system of capturing the data, like beside the 3D data? I mean, like the real-time data.
Unfortunately, you expect that you walk in these projects and all the infrastructure is there to do the project, and in reality, there are gaps, and that's why you really need to assess first what we want to accomplish. Don't assume that you have the data in the fidelity, frequency, or the sensing capabilities. A lot of times, we just didn't have sensors. We had to go through an entire sensor strategy on the water system, for example. We had to test out certain flow and pressure sensors, solar cellular. We had to look at connectivity in the regions, and then you have to go through construction, design, construction, build, and implement and commission before the sensor is ready, before you could actually implement the digital twin. So there's a whole maturity aspect to this. So before you get too head over your skis, it's really important to take a step back on the operational use cases and say, okay, this is what we want to do. This is who we want to accomplish it for this person. Then start to look at the systems you have. Like if I have a lot of legacy systems, I can't surface the data from the PLCs, meaning that like the computers, the control systems. If I can't get access to it, how am I going to bring that into my twin? So there, a lot of that needs to be assessed up front. So once you have it all assessed and you know where you need to go, you can execute pretty quickly. But you'll probably find gaps along the way. So the gaps need to be assessed and quantified, and you need to be able to pivot, right? Because you want to have success, and these are all business cases, and you need to say, well, this is going to be cost prevent. This is going to be too costly to do this. Let's do something else instead. So I think you got to do a lot of that planning up front.
We already discussed like what's going to happen if the airport is not in operation, but after the whole project, like have you seen or have you done some ROI calculations?
Oh yeah,
the question is simple, like where was the money?
Value? Yeah, I mean, where I think some of the most significant money saved, and I won't give exact dollars here, but I'll give some round numbers that can be quite staggering. Look at your service contracts, right? So the service contracts are about $150 million at the airport. Wrench time, meaning how much time the technicians are able to perform their job without distraction, was probably in the 15% range, and where you need it to be is around in that 45% range. So you have a 3 times multiplier of being able to be efficient and to not necessarily save any money, because you're not going to save on your service contract. It's the same service contract, but you could triple your productivity in what you get done. And where a lot of organizations live in a highly reactive maintenance space, things are breaking, and the cost of doing emergency maintenance is about 5 times what it does to do planned maintenance. So being able to diagnose problems, look at them before they're disruptive, and to be able to fix them effectively and stay on top of your preventative maintenance, reduce and mitigate your emergency work and put it into plan work, absolutely huge. So I won't give the final numbers there, but I mean that 15 to 45% is where that value is incrementally increasing every day. And I think there's probably nearly 350 people in the twin every day using it as a digital process of working. So that has changed the way the organization really kind of operated. One area I'll hone into is the QA team. So the QA team is there on the owner side to check the quality of work of the service provider. At best, you're checking 1 out of 10, 20 items. And probably there's pencil whipping is what we call it, when people said it was done and it wasn't done on both sides. The contractor said, I did the maintenance, it didn't really, I went to lunch instead. And a lot of that visibility wasn't apparent. But with the twin, with the continuous monitoring, when something is not done, you can see it on the dashboard from a performance perspective. You can hold accountability. So it is completely given visibility to something there was really little visibility. And it also, this fear of these QAs that the machine was going to take over, the machine became the most valuable asset they have and made their job important, and it empowered them to do their job in a way they never thought. And where we started to see is actually giving promotions to some that happened to be a little younger, more savvy, more diving into it, got promotions. And so now you start to see, not only does the twin help the business, but it helps me as an individual. There's opportunity for elevation. And that's culturally a really big chasm that was crossed there that a lot of programs don't get to. So I think that's where I see a lot of the savings, just right in that maintenance side of things.
You mentioned wherever people are like losing time and the effort during the service management and facility management. And when I was speaking to Barry Bestnet, he said that there is an official statistics and survey being done about how much of time is lost
Yeah.
just searching.
Oh yeah, it's
Like like
massive.
like these people doing facility management, they spend almost 20% of their time just searching. So imagine one day of a week you are just searching for things,
Well,
not doing
I
your
think
job.
I think it's a much bigger number in an airport, like the size and gravity and multiple terminals, even just the distance to walk from one place. It could take me 45 minutes to get to a location. And then you got, these friction points like access. Oh, I can't get in. I got to go back. I didn't bring a tool. I didn't go back. It's all about that waste that really happens. Or I'm going to get the tool from the tool room, and it's not in, or I'm trying to get a piece of equipment and it's not in. So all that logistical part of the work is huge. Or I sent the wrong person. I sent the wrong person to the problem because they can't diagnose it from the twin. They have to go in person, and they get there and like, yep, this is not me. I need the other person. And the other person comes out and they're like, well, it's not me. It's the other person. Actually, it's both of them that need to be there. And this is the kind of inefficiency that happens in the human world. Whereas we can diagnose virtually, understand what needs to be done, who needs to be there, and do it efficiently. Like that's the huge game changer here. You
And
still got to
some
change wrenches. You still got to fix things physically in the physical world, right?
sure, but sometimes on a side it's really stupid tasks. Like you have to send for 1 hour somewhere somebody just to measure the distance between the wall and the machine, just
Yeah.
to be sure whether the new one is going to fit there or whether there is enough manipulation space for some operation reconstruction whatever,
Yeah.
right? And this is just adding up. Like these are
Oh
hours
yeah.
and days and maybe weeks during the year.
I get to the site and I need a scissor lift. I'm like, oh, the asset's 30 feet in the sky. I can't get to it. Oh, time for lunch, right? Oh, like, oh, who's got the scissor lift? I don't know. Bob's got it. Well, let's push this project till next week. So these are the types of things that happen every day on these job sites. So the more efficient they can be, and the efficiency comes around proper planning. And if you can execute a plan that is as perfect as can be and communicated well, and if you schedule all your work out, and one thing I thought was really cool with scheduling is schedule and group work by a physical location. It's really hard to do that in an asset management tool because it's just a database. It's like a spreadsheet. You might have a common room number, but it's hard to group those things. That, well, what should I do to accomplish as much as I can in this area at one point in time? So it's a
Mhm.
re-engineering how we do work, right? So I think those that have been on the job site for 30 plus years do this out of their human nature. They just understand, right? And they can make those decisions. And those people are leaving our industry. And the younger generation, they're not able to kind of put those things together. So the better we can use digital technology to do that, better off we're going to be.
What is emotional digital twin?
Yeah,
Do I pronounce it right?
yes,
Is it
yes,
motional?
yeah, yeah, and the term was coined by a French company out Raoul out of Outsite, and I took that term and kind of at first I wasn't sure about the emotional, and I kind of debated it in my head a little bit, and then I came to terms with it, and I said, you know what, I like this. I like that it distinguishes what we're measuring, which is unique, and that's really the movement of it could be people, vehicles, cargo, anything to that effect in the physical environment.
So
And
basically logistics.
it's a logistics use case within a digital twin using the visualization and the movement, right? So I mean, like the Twinzo guys do a great job showing all the forklifts running around, or an Amazon warehouse is going to show a lot of that movement, right? And I think that orchestrated planning and when things kind of fail, How do you react? And things like resources, like schedule, right? So do I have the right amount of people at a certain place? Or how do I route people? And I look at digital signage. How can I change flow by signage, right? How do I get a police officer to be out to help remove congestion? So resources that are human, that get out in the field in a real time or in a forecasting way too, right? It's not just about real time. If it's real time, it's already happened. Too late, we got a problem, right? But if we can forecast based on historics and we understand flow, but we understand other things like a weather event, and we can anticipate, we can put resources to anticipate and mitigate some of that. So that's where this kind of term motional digital twin is kind of created around, how do we deal with a digital twin, which is a 3D representation of the world with this live movement of vehicles, traffic, and resourcing of people, and how do we make that more efficient, right? So how do we use it for planning and forecasting, simulation, and real-time events?
How is it different compared to what you did in on the airport project?
We wrote it for the airport project and for the deployment, and we're using it for the LiDAR installations that were done at Terminal D, that were done for the Olympic Games, so that we can measure all of the vehicle traffic coming in the area, and also
with LiDARs?
Yeah, physical LiDARs, hundreds that are physically installed state, and they measure, but it creates a full point cloud. It creates a massive area, 4 or 5 lanes of traffic, 2 levels, everywhere from the parking garage into the actual physical space. And every person is a unique object that you get basically every second a movement XYZ of where that object is moving. So, you can build dashboards and reports and understand flow, and you can start to look at, well, how do I change that flow, right? Or how do I resource to handle that flow? Or, these are the types of decisions that can be made. And some of that's a historical thing for a planning, or some of it is more of a preparation for what's going to come. And some of it might be more real time, as I mentioned, so that we can make sure we can handle that. But again, there's real numbers, just like you were mentioning on the Dubai airport on being down. When a passenger is rushing, they don't spend money. So there's a real hard number of every minute how much money that they will spend, and it's significant. I believe a minute was like a 10% increase of retail spend, and you think of that on hundreds of millions of dollars, that's a big number. So I wrote an article on it, so you quote me from the article, not from just hearsay on this, but I was really fascinated when I dig into that, how important it is.
What keeps you awake these weeks, days, months? What's your current passion?
Well, transitioning from just being really full time on DFW, it's like, what's the next big beast I'm going to put my hands around? And I got a handful of projects right now, but the pursuits on some big city projects to other data center projects we're working on. The one I'm really quite excited about is on the data center side, is really digging into the continuous commissioning during construction. So actually building the twin and having live data feeding through the twin while assets are performing before the handover. So I think that's a huge one. And then just the unification of data. Like, I'm really excited about a lot of the sensor data I'm dealing with, but there's so many silos, right? You have your SCADA system, your building automation control, your security, fire life safety, your IT assets. They're all different control interfaces. It's really ugly. It's an ugly space, right? So unifying that data and bringing it into a 3D geospatial space so you can visually see where your problems are really, really phenomenal. So I'm excited about that world. And, I think just in terms of the way I look at it, you need power, you need data communications, or nothing seems to work. And you need to physically understand where your problems are. So that's where I see that the sensor data involved in a digital twin is really a very important thing for system performance. But again, it could mean different things for different stages of that project lifecycle. Construction, even with construction, a lot of video cameras, a lot of other things are being pushed into construction today that are giving another layer of understanding and intelligence.
Mm-hmm. What's your opinion about the discussed problems with data centers, about the supply of the water, supply of the energy, and
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it. So some of this misinformation that's out there, some of it's real. So power. There's limited power, and these things are power hogs. So data centers are going to have to create their own power on site. So what does that look like, right? And the interconnectivity between a data center to now utilities to other things, it really a digital twin is what would really help to drive that complexity and understanding. Water distribution is another big one. You can use reclaimed water instead of potable drinking water. But what does that do to the assets? We can also look at, these data centers are bringing a lot of wealth into the communities and investment. Are they making the right business decisions with their investments? So one of the areas I'm looking at with a core in Maine is we're doing a research study right now. It's like, is there an appetite the hyperscalers are going to willing to invest in the infrastructure itself? Let's fix the water leaks. So some of these rural water systems are 45% loss. 45% of the water just going into the ground today because you're not fixing it. So you're starting with a huge opportunity to repair and fix so that you can be a net plus one. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Whenever you have a lot of capital moving to a certain area, it's just you just really got to think it through and say, well, what can we do to offset the negatives, and what can we do to brace the positives?
Mm. Do you think for the future, I could see this, for example, with photovoltaic power plants back like 10 to 15 years. I was actually in a business, and the trend was to build these huge plants on a soil on a fields. And today we can see that buildings like roofs are covered with photovoltaic plants.
Yeah.
Do you think that for the future this might be the case again, that we in some time we will stop building big data centers, but instead we will start building like these peer-to-peer or just nodes, just the network of domestic data centers? Like, for example, you would be able to buy a container, put it on your garden, like on your backyard, and just add to the whole network of data centers.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept, right? And the crowd sourcing of energy data, I think there's opportunity there.
It would definitely help the distribution of sources, right, of the supplies.
Even your electrical vehicles, they're just sitting there when they're not being used in a parking lot. Well, I mean, they're battery power systems. So, I mean, the future holds some pretty amazing things. And I think as humans, we solve crazy problems that we never thought we could have solved. And I think we'll see when the pressures are presenting themselves. We'll see more probably distribution of that. I think the big data centers, they're problematic. They're problematic, and they're trying to hide them in these remote communities, out of sight, out of mind. The noise level. You don't want something like that on a beautiful lake where you have $1 million homes. Like, it's just not going to fly, right? So, but the problem, we have to embrace it because it fuels the technology we use every day, and our appetite is not going to go away. Once we start to have a technology and all this AI, we have such a hunger for it. So, and it's driving innovations, driving, even just national power within countries. Like, you can't, once the Pandora's box open, like it's not going to go away. So you got to look at the mitigating factors. Like I think distribution is a big one, decentralization, but we'll have to see what the future holds.
There is no going back with AI. Like there is no future without AI, like ever. And as soon as we realize that, the sooner we will be able to think about how to deal with this, how to live with this, and how to just adjust. Like there would need to be a nuclear war all around the world to get rid of the AI. Like there is no way we will have a future without AI. Like ever.
I think Elon was pretty prolific with his early statements about AI and where it was Pandora out of the box, and it's out now. So, I mean, we need to have good governance. We need to have, good discipline with it because it could be used really negatively. And but it's quite powerful, and it's going to change the world. I really think with robotics in particular, with AI and robotics and making robotics smart, it's going to completely change the world.
Kelly, thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, great conversation. Thanks for having me.